Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for our Disabled Student Programs webinar. Hopefully you will get a lot of information out of this session and walk away with some more knowledge, with some contact information should you have questions in the future. This session is being recorded, so you all will receive the recording. So don't worry about, you know, taking a whole bunch of notes for today's session. We want you to take notes, but again, this session is being recorded, so if you miss something, it's okay. We got you covered. So just a few housekeeping items for you all. Um, Closed captioning, if you should need it, just click on the CC closed captioning button below in your toolbar, and that will enable the closed captioning for you. Again, this webinar is being recorded. We will be posting this webinar on our website. And so you'll see that eventually. I'd give it a couple of weeks before you can see that recording, but you also will receive the recording via email. And then lastly, as we already demonstrated a little earlier, the Q&A box is there for you all below. And please note for the Q&A box, we are going to be answering questions at the end of the session. So go ahead, put those questions in there so you don't forget them. And then at the end, Courtney will go over those questions with you all, and it can be an exchange of information. And then also, of course, you can follow us. Here's our contact information, and then a QR code that takes you to some admissions information if that's something you're interested in looking at around this time. So let me stop share. And now I will turn it over to Courtney for her introduction and to get started on the presentation. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Courtney Castleman Bucher, and I'm a disability specialist, primarily working with students with autism at UC Berkeley's Disabled Students Program. Thank you so much, Vera and Jenny, for having me today. It's great to meet you both, and I'm happy to share some information about the DSP, but also disability culture at Berkeley. And if you have any questions, again, like Vera said, please pop those in the Q&A and I'd be happy to answer them at the end as we get to them. So from Equal Access to Thriving, Inclusive Excellence in the Disabled Students Program, there's a picture to the left-hand side of the campanile. In the background, in the foreground, there's some trees and a blue sky up above. And again, my name is Courtney Castleman Bucher, and I'm an autism disability specialist. And I also just want to invite you all to think about your access needs during this presentation. If you need to lie down for a minute, I don't know if you're at home watching this or somewhere else, but if you need to, do whatever you need to do to get comfortable, or, just know that, I want this to be as accessible to everyone as possible. So if later you need a PDF version or anything like that, I invite you to reach out to me if you need anything for access. So here's a little bit more about me and just kind of my background and kind of my vision as I think about being a disability specialist. So both inside and outside of my role as a disability specialist, I thrive in purposefully envisioning the future and emboldening others in reaching their aspirations, both educational and personal. My work as a disability specialist is a little bit more transactional in the part where I'm providing academic accommodations to students, but the other half of my job is really going beyond compliance to provide support for students. And that's the aspect that I love so much of my job. Well, the disability specialist part is neat too, because I get to do a lot of problem solving, and no two students are really alike when you think about that. But I really think of kind of the big picture. I'm a sociologist, and I think of disability in the social sense, in that it is the inaccessible environment and barriers that are disabling. And so I really come from that background. My research had to do with, was at the intersection of disability and higher education, and primarily in my undergraduate research, I was interviewing educators about their experiences working with students with autism in the K through 12 setting across an entire public school district. But then in my graduate studies, I interviewed students across an entire university that had invisible or non-apparent disabilities about the challenges they experienced with disclosure and how they determined who, where, and why to disclose their disability on campus. And it was super interesting for me. I am a first generation, or was a first generation college student, so I really come with like an equity stance to my job, and I really want to think about who's not here and why. How do we get education more accessible to all? So that's kind of a little bit about my background. I have multiple disabilities, so I have experience navigating the medical and educational worlds and as a disabled person. And on the left, there's a picture of me when I had a little bit more blonde in my hair. I'm a 5'6" white woman with brown medium length hair, and right now I'm wearing clear glasses. But in my picture, I'm not. So I just got some glasses, and they're really helping me out. Well, welcome. So today we're going to talk a little bit about inclusive excellence, the different language around disability, because I think it's good to just put that out there, because everyone identifies a little bit differently in our community. I'll tell you a little bit about the data. So DSP, who's enrolled with DSP, and the services we provide. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the interactive process in college, in case you're not familiar with that. It's generally a lot the same across different colleges, in that you have to participate in an interactive process in order to engage with the Disability Services Office. However, it varies a little bit institution to institution. So I'll give you a quick rundown on how that works at Berkeley and just in general. Some common campus resources that are great for students with disabilities. DSP student support services. So like I mentioned, we really aim to go above compliance and beyond, ADA necessity, and kind of move towards, move towards a more accessible, inclusive environment at Berkeley. And really, we kind of call everyone to participate in that, because we want to destroy ableism and make everything a lot more accessible for a lot of people. So I'll tell you a little bit about the additional support services we provide through DSP. I run a program for autistic students called Spectrum Connect that I love, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in case you're a student with autism, or someone that is autistic either at Cal or coming to Cal. And then we have a program called DSP Scholars I want to talk about too. Then just where to find us, and we'll definitely have time for questions as well. So first I want to talk about inclusive excellence a little bit. This is a newer term that we're hearing a lot, and our new executive director, Carmen Varela, is really excited about this term and is really striving for this at the university. So inclusive excellence is kind of a new spin on what we call universal design. So it's this idea that if we make campus more accessible for everybody, by doing so, we're also making it more accessible for people with disabilities, right? So this is an active process that everyone's engaged in to make our university more accessible. What does that mean, right? So if we think about things like curb cuts, for example, that were created for people in wheelchairs, it also benefits somebody with a stroller, or somebody who's carrying something heavy, or, lots of things, and the doors that help, the access buttons that help people get in and out of buildings, just as an example, is a popular way of illustrating universal design, because a lot of people use those, right? Well, inclusive excellence is a little bit different. It still uses the principles of universal design and access for everybody, but it really is striving for inclusive excellence where everybody gets kind of the same opportunities and shot to succeed. So it goes beyond equal access, and it's more about making a world and an environment that is truly accessible for everybody. And, when we look at statistics, for example, in the job market, we can see that people with disabilities are chronically underemployed. And so, through striving for inclusive excellence, we're trying to promote more opportunities for people with disabilities. So, this slide says making excellence inclusive is thus an active process through which colleges and universities achieve excellence in learning, teaching, student development, institutional functioning, and engagement in local and global communities. So that's why I brought up the employment piece. So it's really a larger goal, even beyond the university, right? And what we do here matters because we do set the standard in a lot of ways at Berkeley. And then the next quote is the action of making excellence inclusive requires that we uncover inequities in student success, identify effective educational practices, and build such practices organically for sustained institutional change. So that's just, and that's where it really speaks to my work as a sociologist. So it's really about uncovering these inequities and doing something about it, right? In the real sense, in our community, both at Berkeley and beyond. And by doing so, even at Berkeley, a microcosm of our larger environment, we're making substantial change. So this is an invitation for everybody. So just to talk a little bit about language in the disability community, as you've already noticed, I'm very comfortable with the word disabled, disabled students, disability. Our office is called the Disabled Students Program, but it's important to remember that some people come to this community and would prefer different language. I definitely have students registered with our office that don't think about themselves as disabled and definitely don't call themselves disabled. However, they have a condition that meets the qualifications under the ADA for accommodations, right? And we definitely have some folks that would prefer person first language versus identity first language. We have folks and students that would like to use big D disabled, very disabled and proud, and also politically active in the disabled community. And then we have other people that are really kind of focused on the medical aspects of having a disability, where others are a little bit more kind of like me, thinking about disability in the context of the environment being inaccessible and rendering someone disabled. Nothing's wrong with a person, that it has a difference, right? And also not afraid of the word disabled. Big D disabled, I talked about that one, but I skipped over disability as a neutral part of life. So often people say that most people will become disabled at some point in their life in one way or another through aging or, whatever temporary disability. And so it's just a neutral part of life. And I sometimes think of it that way. And let's see, universal design, which I mentioned, is creating a more inclusive and universally accessible world. So, for example, this also helps, other students that are facing inequities. For example, you know, um, the Zoom environment, for example, through the pandemic, right? We were kind of forced into that world, right? But through that world, we realized that certain people could gain access that maybe couldn't have gained access in the past. And conversely, kind of blocked out some other folks that don't do as well on the computer. So, it's just a broader way of thinking about disability. I mention this because as you get to know each other in community, you'll find a really diverse perspective on disability and language. You'll definitely have people who want the person-centered language, people with a disability, students with disabilities. And, I would say it's a little bit more popular in the non-disabled community. But, if a student identifies that way, or a peer or a professor or whoever it may be identifies that way, we always want to respect that. But also hold space for identity first language. For some people, disability is a very salient part of their identity. And and they want to have that out front, but maybe it's not the only salient part of their identity. For example, I'm a woman, but I'm also a mother, and I'm also an educator and all these other things, right? So I just kind of bring this up because I feel like language is always shifting. And as I talk about disability, I want people to know where I'm coming from. And I tend to use a little bit of a mix too, because we have such a diverse population at Berkeley. So just a quick data snapshot to give you an idea of who's registered at the Disabled Students Program, how many students. So give or take, we're sometimes around 6,000 is kind of the number that sticks with me. At the end of last spring, we had 5,899, and that number is always growing. So we're getting more and more students with disabilities at Berkeley, which I think is really exciting. And then also just people that are more comfortable now seeking the support that they've always needed. So I think that's great. The largest group of students registered with our office have a psychological disability. And I often hear things like, oh, I didn't know I could get an accommodation for this. Yes, absolutely. Psychological disabilities are also real disabilities, right? So we have a lot of students that experience diagnoses like bipolar or depression or generalized anxiety. So if you're a student that has a disability that's a psychological disability that's impacting your everyday life activities, including like your academics, know that you can definitely apply to our program. About 168 students with autism are registered with our office. Under the autism spectrum, there's a couple other disabilities too. And that may not sound like a lot, but that number's really been growing. And I'm excited to share that we have a lot of new students that are minimally speaking or nonverbal, definitely demonstrating that they can go beyond the qualifications of getting a degree at Berkeley. And so I think that's really exciting. A majority of students registered with the DSP have co-occurring conditions. So a student might be registered with us with several disabilities, or a student might be registered with us with one disability and then acquire a new disability. So our process at Berkeley continues always because disability is not usually static. Even lifelong conditions can change, right? And the context that we're in can change as well. I also want to invite folks to feel free to stretch or get a glass of water. I know it's a lot of material we're kind of cruising through, so feel free to take a deep breath or get some ice water. Okay, whoops. A majority of students registered with us have these co-occurring conditions, like I mentioned. So accommodations aren't necessarily straightforward and do take some time to solidify and to find the best fit. Meaning that if you apply with us, we'll set you up with the best accommodations possible. But you can always come with feedback for us if things are not working out well, right? Or if they could be better, even. Let's see here. About 877 students received housing accommodations in 2023. So our office really handles academic accommodations. However, if you're a student with a disability that has campus housing, you're welcome to apply to ADA housing. And we have a housing coordinator who's kind of half DSP, half residential life, who can review your request. And you kind of get support from both teams in that way. To the right, there's a student looking on their phone, but it looks like they're working on some homework there. This is a visual description. So here's kind of the main aspects of the interactive process, just as a quick primer on that for everybody. Some of you may be very familiar with this. Some of you may not have any experience with this. So accommodations in college are quite different than in the K through 12 setting. They fall under different law, they fall under different procedures and policies, and the student takes a different role here. And so does the administrator and oftentimes parents. So it does change quite a bit. In the K through 12 setting, educators are responsible for finding students with disabilities, locating them, and providing accommodations for success and benefit. In K through 12, the responsibility is on the student to come to us and say, hey, I am experiencing some barriers to accessing my academics. Here's my application. And then we can work with them to acquire more information and set up accommodations. So we call that the interactive process. And like I said, the interactive process can continue if you're registered with our office for your whole time at Berkeley. You can always come back to us if things change or if you needed an adjustment. And the interactive process, I've worked at 3 different universities as a specialist now. The interactive process is pretty much the same at every college, but there can be some nuanced differences. But in general, you would disclose your disability to the Disabled Services Office. So in this case, the Disabled Students Program at Berkeley. You would submit some medical documentation. So we just have a 1-page application. It's online. It asks you a few questions. It's pretty quick. But we do ask for some medical documentation. And this is where it can become a little tricky for folks. If you already have medical documents from a medical provider, or psychologist, a therapist, or a licensed clinician that just states your diagnosis and the functional impact, meaning how that diagnosis affects your everyday functioning, then apply with that. However, if you have something that's 20 years old that you're applying with, it really may not illustrate the current impact of your disability. So we do ask for something current. If it's a couple years old, that's fine. But if you're unsure of what document you should be using to submit to our office, you can always come by for a consultation. We have drop-ins almost every day. And people are happy to talk to you. Disability specialists are there, happy to talk to you about your documents. If you're experiencing medical access issues, apply with what you have and explain the medical access issues that you're facing, and we'll try our best to work with you. So sometimes that's, coaching you through where to go to get a document. Or sometimes, and I can't promise it without seeing a document, but sometimes if you have some documents, we can set up temporary accommodations while you seek more long-term documents that illustrate more long-term need. So you disclose, you apply, you submit some documents, and then you schedule an intake session. During that intake session, with me, if you're autistic probably, or one of our disability specialists on our team, is an hour long usually. Most of them are about an hour. In that meeting, we ask some questions about how your disability has impacted you in the educational setting. For example, have your symptoms popped up in classes? Have classes not been accessible for you because of certain barriers? You describe some of that to us, and we get a self-report that we take that data along with any medical documents you've submitted to design accommodations at Berkeley. And so we're really also keeping in mind the classes at Berkeley, the rigor, the various types of classes you're taking. Are they labs? Are they history classes? Because a certain accommodation may not work in one class, but maybe another. So it really is a data collection process. Sometimes, I might need to consult with a professor to learn a little bit more about the expectations of the class, because the accommodations are there to remove a barrier to access, or, I would say students with disabilities have to meet the same requirements. So it's to assist them in meeting those requirements. Let's see here. So step 1, apply and disclose, send in documents. Step 2 is meet for an intake session and provide some context. Step 3, sometimes we need to consult with a professor on our end, or get a syllabi or some more information about a program and its expectations. Step 4, we assist students in communicating with professors. For example, they log in and send a letter to the professors that illustrates their accommodations and doesn't share any disability information. So that's kept private within our office, but it'll let the professor know that, maybe you have extra time on tests, or maybe, you are approved for an occasional deadline extension, things like that. And then I put 5, even though there's only 4 in this little chart, which is like a circle. Step 5 is that it continues indefinitely, like I said. So if you have your accommodations set up and then you find that they're really not working in your chemistry class, or, you know, you find, that not even just the context changes, but maybe your disability changes or you have a new disability, you can always come back to us and you don't need to reapply or anything. You would just come for a follow-up session or sometimes even a drop-in if it's a quick update. And then what else should I share about that? I think we also kind of go beyond that process to support students a little bit more holistically. So, for example, if you need resources on campus, we're kind of like the liaison on campus to figure out who's best to talk to and where to go because it's a really large campus. And also, I try to coach students a little bit too on how to communicate with professors about their disability without sharing much about, or if anything, about their disability. And if there's ever pushback on a accommodation that's federally approved, then I kind of step in and take over that advocacy role for the student. So if that ever happens, I tell a student, just reach out to me and I'll be the one to talk with the professor or lab assistant or whoever it may be. Let's see. So that was just kind of a quick and dirty rundown on the interactive process in college and how it works, and a little bit more about how we do it at Berkeley. I put together this list of kind of just like common resources that I find that I'm like providing often to students registered with our department. And I'll highlight a few of these and you can take a look. ADA housing, like I mentioned, if you're offered housing and accept and you realize that you need an accommodation in your housing, you can apply with them. Career engagement is a really good resource at Berkeley. The Center for Academic Excellence in Engineering is awesome. There's just so many great resources at Berkeley. Center for Support and Intervention is available for students that are under like having distress, or, it can rise to the level of crisis, or it could even just be someone's feeling very stressed and has tried reaching out to counseling and has tried other things and still feeling like they need some additional support navigating the university. Or if you know a friend that is in crisis and you want to reach out to them, they're there to support with social workers or case managers that can assist. Counseling and psychological services is great at Berkeley. So if you're having a hard day and you just need someone to talk to, or if you're having a flare up in a psychological condition, they're a really great place to check in with, and they can provide a lot of support. They have some really wonderful group counseling sessions that meet. There are all sorts of groups on all sorts of things from what is it? From self-criticism to kindness. That's a really popular one. Let's see. We have the Gender Equity Office. We have inclusive recreation for people with disabilities. That's really cool. We have a lot of sports for people with disabilities. There's some all sorts of great things there. But those are just a few things to highlight. The Student Learning Center is a great resource for many students. And through UHS, which is our medical center here, there is dietitian and nutrition services. So if you're someone who struggles with an eating disorder, or maybe even if you're just concerned about your diet habits and you need a little support, there's some really wonderful people there. And if you have UC ship through the university, you would qualify for services, which is, I think, a great reason to have that insurance. I also wanted to share with you all that we have a disability cultural, sorry, I always get this wrong, Disability Cultural Community Center. There, I said it right. We call it the DCC. I think because DCCC is too long. It's a really great space, and I would encourage you to check it out at Berkeley. It's not just open for students registered with DSP, but it's open to the broader disability community, or the disabled community. So it's located behind Sproul Hall, kind of tucked behind the social sciences building. It's really nice because it's a pretty quiet space unless they're having an event. And there's a little kitchenette if you need to warm up your food or if you need to use the fridge. There's also a low sensory zone, which a lot of my students like to use if you're neurodivergent and you're just having a tough day and you need a quiet space. There's like a beanbag chair and just a place to relax. The furniture is very accessible and moves around. There's also a little library there with a lot of books on disabled culture that you might want to check out. So that's a really cool space. On the left-hand side, there's a picture of a panel of disabled folks. You might recognize Judith Human if you're looking at this. Rest in peace, dear Judy Human. And some other folks that came to the DCC to celebrate Crip Camp and talk about that film. Um, and Wai Kwong is our coordinator over there. She's really wonderful. There's a green space out front, that people can reserve. And all sorts of disabled folks and allies can reserve this space for events that either benefit the disabled community, or if you're just a disabled student that wants to organize something fun, like it's a really cool space. There's a conference room. It's just really neat. It's worth checking out for sure. And then some other services the DSP provides. So not only do we have the DCC, but we have DSP Scholars, which is our special connection with TRIO for students with disabilities. So TRIO is a federally funded program that I'll talk about in a minute that provides additional academic support. It's really cool. And through Berkeley Career Engagement, we actually have our own disability career counselor. So this is an openly disabled person, Ricardo Flores. He's wonderful, and he can support you if you're a disabled student in thinking wisely about your career choices, in not just like creating a resume and cover letter, things like that, but also how to navigate requesting accommodations in your career, things like that. What else do we have here? This is newer, but we do have some graduate student peer support that's exciting. That probably doesn't relate to you folks, but it's just good to know that there are a lot of, there's a lot of support at Berkeley. We have a mental health program that's really robust that includes workshops, and there's some peer coaching through that program that's really neat. And then my favorite, of course, because I'm biased, is Spectrum Connect, my program for autistic students on campus. And I'm excited to share that we've received some funding for the next couple years. So we have some really cool workshops coming up. We have a social group that meets weekly. It's really cool. So that's just a little bit about additional services through the DSP that kind of go above compliance to really try to support students more holistically, whether it be connecting socially with other people with disabilities or not, or even just providing more insights into their career expectations and how that might relate to being a disabled person in the world. And that mental health program is really cool too, because like I said, a lot of our students do have psychological disabilities. Let's check time here, make sure I don't run out of time. Autism Services Spectrum Connect. I'm really excited about this because this is kind of my pride and joy, my program that I've been building up. So we have weekly social group, which is for students with autism or anyone registered with the DSP that identifies as autistic or on the spectrum. We do fun stuff. We play games. We have fun icebreakers. We do picnics in the park, things like that. We have monthly social events. We're having some workshops coming up that I'm really excited about. Did I say that already? Probably. I'm really excited about those workshops. And let's see here. I provide oftentimes referrals over to DSP Scholars if students need more academic support. They do reserve slots in the TRIO program for students that identify as autistic, which is really cool. And also referrals to RecWell for that inclusive recreation activity support. So they have personal trainers sometimes I can connect you with if you want to, maybe the gym's like too overwhelming or something, and you might just want to do a one-on-one session with a personal trainer. Happy to refer students over there. And again, like that nuanced career readiness support. So Ricardo often comes to our social group and does events specifically for students on the spectrum. And on the right-hand side, I have this meme that I just love that says some disabilities look like this and some look like this. And the first series is, people with a cane, mobility devices, a wheelchair, a crutch. And then some look like this. And it was just a person standing there. And I think that's really important to remember that the majority of students registered with our office have non-apparent or invisible disabilities. So a lot of people are kind of navigating how to disclose, where to disclose, and how to seek support. And that's where we really try to be able to, give some nuanced guidance. So again, DSP Scholars, it used to be called DSP Trio, but now DSP Scholars, I love the name of it, the name change, is dedicated to providing individualized support to a small cohort of DSP students. And services include disability management counseling, academic coaching and goal setting, skill building workshops, financial aid and scholarship assistance, graduate school and career counseling, community building, and cultural events. So it's a neat program. And it's a good way to also like foster relationships with like a peer study buddy. Similar to Spectrum Connect, provides a lot of accountability for students that need a little additional support with academics. So if that's you, definitely, if you register with DSP, mention that you're interested in joining DSP Scholars. Where to find the DSP? So right now we're located on Upper Sproul Plaza in the Cesar Chavez building, the student center there. The student center is big, but what's neat about the DSP is we're kind of in the front corner of it. So if you walk onto campus and you're heading towards Sather Gate, and on the right is a large Sproul Hall. On the left, you'll see a little fountain and the Golden Bear Cafe, and right there behind it, you'll see this sign, maybe Disabled Students Program. And that's where we're located. We are providing services in a hybrid format. So oftentimes we meet virtually, or we can meet in person if need be. Some students prefer that. That's where we are. And I included a little map. So if you're walking in from Telegraph, we would be on the left-hand side. And our address is 260 Cesar Chavez Student Center. And there's other wonderful things in the Cesar Chavez building, like the Student Learning Center I mentioned. If you want to email a question to us, our email is pretty easy to remember. It's just dsp@berkeley.edu. And then if you're applying and you need to send some medical documents, you can do it that way. We also have a fax. Usually most students are doing it electronically these days. And then our phone number is there also at 510-642-0518. Okay, so that's just kind of like where we are. But the really, really, really cool news I'm excited to share with you is I think then at the beginning of spring semester, which is going to come up really quick, I believe. I mean, if pending any, slowdown or any barriers to completion, hopefully none of those happen. We have a new building for the disabled students coming really soon. I'm so excited about this. I got to meet with the architects early on as they started drafting their ideas for this building for us. And who knows if those ideas will come through. I know there's been multiple iterations as they've designed, but I'm super excited about it. This building, I think it maybe used to be the music building back in the day, but now it's going to be renovated, or it's in the process, sorry, of being renovated to be the most accessible building on campus. So not only is it going to be next to the beautiful creek running through campus, there's going to be a really wonderful back area to sit by the creek that will be, I think, very relaxing and nice. There, on the back side, there's a lot of windows that will overlook that. There's a plan for a low sensory computer lab for our neurodivergent students that might need a little bit lower sensory environment to work on the computer. What else? It's just going to be a really cool building. The updates they've provided, I think there's going to be a bridge from one building to the next. It's just going to be really cool. So this is going to be in Dwinell Annex, and hopefully we'll be moving over there real soon. Can't wait to share that all with you. And I think what's cool about it too is it really speaks to Berkeley centering the needs and desires of students with disabilities on campus, and really seeing the disabled community and making a really beautiful space for them. So yeah, so that's a little bit about the new building coming very soon. I included some links. There's an article from last year about the building that's coming. And then we can turn it over to questions, I think. I did want to share first my contact information. So if you have any questions later that come up that you didn't think of, feel free to reach out to C. Castleman at berkeley.edu. If you have questions about Spectrum Connect, my program for students with autism, Spectrum Connect at berkeley.edu. And then if you just have kind of more general questions about the application process or what might be needed to apply, I think the best email for that is just classic DSP at berkeley.edu. All of the cool things coming through in chat. See if you have any questions. Okay, let me see here.
I could read the question out loud to you. There's one in the Q&A box.
That would be awesome. I see it, but if you want to read it out loud, that'd be great for other folks.
Sure. So it says, does docu from MFT count as a medical document? What is ADA housing?
Well, I'll answer the second one first, which is what is ADA housing? So if you're a student that has applied for housing on campus and you've been offered housing and you accept housing, which is the same odds for any new student, I believe, that's undergraduate. If you receive that and you have a need that relates to your disability that you need to request related to housing, then you would want to reach out to ADA housing. And I have the link in the slide, but I could also put it up for you. And it's a little bit of a different interactive process than the one I described for academic accommodations, but it is similar. What they're looking for is some type of document that just verifies your need for a particular accommodation. Some accommodations I can think of as, if you need a fridge for your medication, or maybe your sensory challenges are so much that maybe you need your own dorm space, or whatever it may be. You can apply to ADA housing if you have that need. I'm trying to think of what MFT stands for. Jenny, do you know?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I just remembered what that is. I think it means marriage family therapist, I believe. Yes, I mean, it depends on your disability, and it depends is kind of the real answer. But if you have a psychological disability, a licensed clinician can complete the form. So, for example, if you're seeing a therapist, they're most likely a psychologist or a licensed therapist. As long as they have a license number and it relates, then it should be fine. The reason I say that is, obviously if your foot doctor filled out a form for, I don't know, a psychological disability, that wouldn't make sense. But a marriage and family counselor that's licensed would make sense, I think, for a psychological disability. Let's see here. DSP oriented scholarships for Berkeley transfer students. Great question. I actually just got funding for a really exciting scholarship opportunity that is great if you're a student with autism and you want to share that and create something artistic to share with the community on our social media. If you're selected, you can get a small grant or scholarship for that work that you want to share. We also have something called the Tech Grant. So if you're a student with a disability who's applied and there's a piece of technology that you desperately need and you can't afford to get that piece of technology, we do have a program for that. And there are some other ones that are just like larger scholarships that are connected with DSP in that we can refer you over or write a letter of support for. So I would just encourage you to talk to your disability specialist at your intake and say that that's something you're interested in. Let's see, I'm in the process of having my psych eval. Is there anything specific I should ask or obtain as a part of the process? Ooh, yeah, it's hard to know without like a lot more context, which you might not want to share in a webinar, but I would say that really what we're looking for as a specialist is, obviously the diagnosis so that we have a little bit more context, and under the ADA, which is federal, we do have to have that, but we're looking for the functional impacts that might relate to school. And, it can be more general, and we can obviously relate that. So for example, if you have trouble walking and that's in your evaluation, we know you might need some more assistance getting around campus, right? Or if we know that you're having trouble sleeping, maybe you have trouble with morning classes, right? So, as long as you're illustrating whatever your functional impact is, because as you might imagine, everyone with psychological disabilities is so different, has different symptoms. As long as they're including those impacts in the report, then that will be the most helpful. And if there's a particular impact that you want them to illustrate, you might share a little bit about that with them. That's why it's nice if they really get to know you. That way they can illustrate that. I'll also say it's not one and done, meaning that if you have a report, but maybe it doesn't illustrate all of your functional impact, you can submit multiple documents, and you can also do a self-report in the intake, and we can see if we need more information or not to support a request. So hopefully that answered your question. I would just say look through the report and feel like and just you're the expert on your own disability. Think if it's illustrated well in the evaluation or not. That's what I would suggest. Do you have any more questions? I love these questions. Thank you. Any other questions out there? I'm happy to share more about kind of our additional programming or anything else that I can think of related to disability access. You can also share that, there are a ton of student clubs and organizations and things on campus to be a part of. And like I said, the DCC is a really great space. It's somewhat new. I think we're in year 2 since it's been open. What I think is cool about that is I think it was only the 11th Disability Cultural Center on a college campus nationwide. And since then, I think they've doubled or maybe tripled nationwide, which is really exciting. So I think being a part of the DCC is a really cool opportunity to just build that additional community. And like I said, if you're a student on the spectrum or who identifies as autistic, you can definitely build additional community with other neurodivergent students on campus. So I would just say get involved. There's so many cool opportunities at Berkeley and so many resources that can sometimes be a little overwhelming, like how many resources. But I think the goal is to find the 2 or 3 that really resonate for you and really, check in with those spaces and get to know people over time so that you can watch them grow and change and develop in this awesome trajectory of their education, and they can be witness to you too and your growth at Berkeley. It's really cool. So even though it's a huge university, you have this neat opportunity to connect in certain spaces and build a world within Berkeley for you, whatever that may be. So I would just encourage you to find your spaces on campus, find your people, find your offices, find, the peers that support you and are for you, and you're going to have a great time at Berkeley. All right. I don't know if we have any other questions. I know we're a little early. Thought we might have some more questions, but it was really nice to share some information with you all. Again, if you have any questions later that pop up, you can reach out to me or the DSP front desk at dsp@berkeley.edu. Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for joining. And, it's great to talk about access and, beyond accommodations too. Like I said, we're all responsible to create like a more inclusive campus and world. And I think by having these conversations, we get a chance to do that. So thanks for having me. It was nice to meet you, Jenny, too. And I think we'll just go ahead and wrap up. This recording will be available to you all later if you need to review any of it. Again, if you have any access questions or need a PDF or anything, just feel free to reach out to me.